it's a lot easier to review something that's either really good or really bad, as opposed to really average, and because of that, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get very much attention because it doesn't approach either extreme. Everyone likes raving about stuff that they love and ranting about stuff that they hate, but how do you really throw yourself into talking about something that just makes you feel ambivalent? I've had some negative things to say about a number of the works that I've reviewed on Right to Left, but look, every manga out there sticks around as long as it entertains a good number of people. But there are also plenty of manga that just can't hang with the big boys. They're not necessarily bad, they just don't manage to draw a large enough audience, so they get cancelled. Every so often, Weekly Shonen Jump ends a series to make room for a new one. The most popular manga are pretty much allowed to run their course until the story ends, but it's far more common for manga to be cancelled, usually because they're just not drawing a large enough audience. 2010 was a pretty bad year for new manga in Jump. Only 8 different series debuted and all but one of them were quickly cancelled. The manga we'll be looking at today is unfortunately not The Lone Survivor. The question is, did this short-lived series really deserve the axe? Well, let's read Lock On from Right to Left and find out for ourselves.
Get like a Polaroid picture.
One thing I don't usually tend to address in my videos are covers, but I want to make an exception here because there's one thing I want to point out: the title. More specifically, the fact that the title ends with an exclamation point. So basically the title of the manga is not Lock On, but Lock On! There's a good number of manga out there that deliberately include an exclamation point in the title, almost as if the creators just threw it in there to help convince their audience that it's going to be exciting. I sort of equate this to English writers deliberately including as many X's and K's in their titles as possible just to stand out, but it still bothers me a little that in order to say the name of a manga correctly, I have to sound excited whenever I say it. Not to mention, whereas some manga with exclamation points in their titles deal with subjects that deserve that excitement, Lock On is about taking a camera to school and taking pictures of pretty girls. That's about it. Lock On was written and drawn by Tsuchida Kenta. I have no idea who he is, and apparently nor does anybody else. Initially, Lock On was published as a one-shot in Jump, but reader response was warm enough that Tsuchida was given the go-ahead to write it as an ongoing series, with the first chapter having a plot very similar to the one-shot. I personally like the one-shot a lot more than the first chapter, since it just seems to go to greater lengths to tell the story about who these characters are. In fact, the one-shot is probably better than the ongoing series as a whole, which is a damn shame because of how promising it was. Lock On is the story of Sanada Utsuru, an eccentric teenage professional photographer. However, the protagonist of the story might as well be the female lead, Kurihara Nico, a strong-willed girl who has a bad history with men. Sanada is the star of the manga. He provides most of the comedy with his weird antics, and he usually saves the day with his photography-related abilities. Yes, that's right, I said photography-related abilities. It's manga. I dare you to name a single everyday skill that has not been written as a superpower. There's probably a battle manga out there based around decorative gardening. Anyway, Sanada is the hero of the story, but I think that Nico is more the focus. Her character definitely gets the most growth out of the whole cast, and a lot of the story is told from her perspective. A major recurring element of the story is the developing relationship between Nico and Sanada, which starts off full of awkwardness and tension, and grows into a genuine friendship. In all, the story is pretty simple and doesn't have a lot of structure. Sanada transfers to Nico's school in the first chapter, and the rest of the manga is about the weird antics they get involved in. Most of the conflict that occurs is between Sanada and some person who doesn't want him taking pictures for whatever reason. For example, Nico doesn't want him to take a picture of her because she thinks that all men are deceitful perverts, which you would think would make her an unbearable delusional pessimist, except that her belief is entirely justified. Perverts are everywhere in this fucking series. Peeping Toms, rapists, molesters, everywhere. You know, I think that whole in Japan rape is like saying hello joke has been going on for a really long time, but it's like they're determined to keep giving us excuses to bring it up. There are actually 3 different cases where either Nico or her friend is nearly sexually assaulted, which is pretty damn frequent for a series that didn't even last 20 chapters. Fortunately, Sanada manages to save the day each time, usually because of his supervision. Turns out he can do all sorts of things with the eye he usually keeps covered up with a medical eye patch. He calls it his shutter eye, and with it he can read whether or not people are lying, predict how they're going to move, track them, all sorts of stuff. Actually, it's a little weird, because these are all supposedly skills that really help him as a photographer, but we sure as hell don't see him use them for that purpose very much. Now, I'm not bringing up these qualities as criticisms against the manga, they're just details that I think are kinda weird. In truth, I actually like Lock On, and I have to credit that to the 2 main characters. Sanada and Nico just seem to complement each other really well. Sanada is a prodigy, incredibly talented, confident, and content with who he is. He knows what he wants to do in life, and he does it. He's a little bit of a social misfit since he's very direct in how he deals with people, and he doesn't understand the point of formalities, or personal space for that matter. Nico, on the other hand, is something of a pessimist. She was disillusioned very early on in life because of the way men treated her, and so she toughened herself up so that she could defend herself in a dog-eat-dog world. She's immediately suspicious of odd behavior, especially from men, and she doesn't hesitate to kick people in the face when they get out of line. She's said to rarely smile, but she seems to lower her defenses around Sanada once he's proven himself to be a stand-up guy. Sanada finds Nico to be very interesting, since she's so opposed to him taking her picture when pretty much every other girl he comes across jumps at the chance. In the end, because they have such stubbornly opposing views, they each end up learning something from the other, and ironically, end up much closer than if Nico had just let Sanada take the damn snapshot in the first place. And there's supposed to be some will they, won't they subplot romance thing going on. It would have taken a really long time to resolve, but it got cut short when the series was cancelled, so there you go. Sanada and Nico as a unit make this manga worthwhile in my eyes. Their interactions are interesting and entertaining, and their relationship never feels forced. Unfortunately, by comparison, all the other characters in the series feel like cardboard cutouts. There's Nico's friend Yuki, who, well, she smiles a lot. Then there's a delinquent named Yamato, and he's a little bit more complex. And then there's Sanada's model friend Matsuri, a reserved and shy girl who for some reason gains a lot of confidence on the job when she... What black-hearted servant of Lucifer unleashed this hideous creature on the earth? It's like she's consuming my soul through those gigantic dead eyes. Good lord, this girl's a model? She's supposed to be attractive? How? The fuck is wrong with Japan? The fuck is wrong with Japan? Ugh. Put the glasses back on. Thank you. Ugh. Anyway, Matsuri purely exists to have a crush on Sanada, accuse Nico of also having a crush on Sanada, declare that now they're rivals vying for his affections, and therefore verify that Sanada and Nico are the main couple. She also joins the main cast after that, but she never gets to do anything else. So to recap, here we have a manga that's short on interesting characters and very short on plot. Some manga have lasted much longer on much less, but unfortunately Lock-on's also lacking in a few other areas. For one thing, photography never really comes across as very exciting in this series, even though it's supposedly the main focus. This is a big problem for a shonen series. Readers need to believe that what the protagonist does is cool, and if it's something they don't tend to think is cool already, then it's the creator's job to convince them that it is. Sanada has some unique abilities, and he gets a few chances to show them off, but it never seems to be when he's actually taking pictures. Not to mention, Tsuchiya never really goes the extra length to make the photographs themselves look all that great. Put all that together and you have a protagonist who's supposedly incredible at what he does, but doesn't come across as all that convincing. So in the end, we're supposed to be excited whenever the hero of the story does this. Whoopee! There also seems to be a lack of ambition in the series. Now I don't mean that like Tsuchiya didn't work hard on the manga. I'm sure it was a huge challenge for him to get as far as he did. I mean the characters don't seem all that ambitious. Sanada's biggest goal in life is to be a famous photographer and take pictures of girls all the time. Well, he is a famous photographer who gets to take pictures of girls all the time. Plenty other shonen protagonists have larger-than-life dreams and a real passion to achieve those dreams. Becoming king of the pirates, ridding the world of criminals, finding the secret of the Philosopher's Stone, things that most people would only dream about, and because of this, the characters are that much more interesting for actively pursuing those goals. But there's no such final goal in Lock-on to give the series a sense of direction. There's nothing big to look ahead to and get excited about. The only things keeping the story going are the day-to-day activities the characters go through, and those activities just weren't enough for the series to compete with all the other manga in Jump. So the reasons that Lock-on got cancelled so quickly are pretty obvious. It's not so much that it was bad, it just didn't do enough to pull readers in. Still, I think that Lock-on has some very positive qualities, which deserve discussion. There are two underlying themes in the series that I think are executed very well. First is the relationship between the sexes. Sanada is an unapologetic pervert. He loves girls, he thinks girls are hot, he gets nosebleeds around girls all the time, he wants to take their pictures and take their pictures and take their pictures all night long. But he's also far more considerate than he initially appears. He has standards and he sticks by them. He doesn't take somebody's picture if they tell him not to, so even though he makes a habit of constantly pestering Nico asking to photograph her, he doesn't do it against her will. He gets a pretty cool moment to stand by that rule in one chapter, when a peeping Tom puts up pictures he took in the girls' locker room using a hidden camera. Sanada makes it a point to tear down every picture he finds, with his only explanation being, "This isn't beautiful." Damn right. It's immoral to ogle women without their consent. You should go get porn instead. All kidding aside, there's a very simple lesson to take from this distinction. It's perfectly acceptable to admire other people, even if the way you go about admiring them is kinda creepy. But women should be admired as people, not as objects, which I'll admit is a weird but certainly not unwelcome impression to take from a shonen title. It's definitely not a feminist series by any stretch, but as a manga geared towards young men, it's nice to see that attitude. The second big underlying theme is honesty. Sanada is an incredibly honest person, even at times he'd be better off telling a little white lie or just keeping his mouth shut. This is part of the reason that Nico grows to trust him. She believes that all guys use deceit to get what they want and always have some sort of hidden agenda, but it quickly becomes obvious to her that Sanada wears his heart in his sleeve. Sanada's also got this big belief about how people are at their best when they're being honest, but this is just one half of how the theme is presented. On the flip side, time and again people in the series are hurt when lies are told, even with the best of intentions. So on the one hand, you've got the idealist saying it's good to tell the truth. On the other hand, you've got the pessimist saying people lie all the time, and everyone is worse off for it. It's not by any means a unique moral for the story to have, but it's better executed than in many of the cases I've seen. But still, Lock On was not long for this world. After just 18 chapters and barely 4 months of serialization, the manga was cancelled. I'd play a sound clip from a funeral march, but that might be a little bit of an overreaction. The final 3 chapters are very eventful, so you can tell that Tsuchida had been told of the cancellation at about the time he wrote them. We learn about Sanada's past and see how Nico has changed in the series' short run, and she even admits to herself that she's fallen for Sanada. It's a strong finish, and it convinced me that Tsuchida deserves a second shot at some point in the future. So, unfortunately, that's all there is to say about Lock On! I like this manga, I do, but I can't really give it a strong recommendation. I think that part of the reason I like it may be because it was so short-lived. Had it lasted longer, it could have very well worn thin on me. I don't know. Maybe it's best that it ended too early as opposed to too late. If you're interested in collecting it, Shueisha has released 2 volumes containing all 18 chapters of Lock On. However, there is no official English translation for the series, and I don't expect it to ever get licensed. I'm Y Ruler of Time, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. Just be sure to read those words from right to left.